In Buddhism, when you're developing loving kindness, there are some precepts to follow, and one of those is Kalyana mittata. And this is the correct attitudes for association. One of the rules is to avoid spending time with the foolish. And the others is associating with the wise. And this can be confusing because the Buddhist perspective from the suttas frequently contradict common Western or religious ideas. The primary goal is to understand what the Buddha actually advised regarding the people we keep our company with. So a common question is how we distinguish from these fools and these wise people. So in this context, foolishness is an attitude rather than a lack of intelligence. Fools are primarily those who are not willing to try to change, or to put effort in things, but more so to do with change and improvement. So there's a distinction for sure, a very clear one, between the wise and the foolish, or rather the foolish and the intelligent, or the intelligent and the wise. They're different. So monks don't expect, we don't expect people to be perfect or fully enlightened immediately. And even in the Sangha, monks and nuns are under constant pressure to improve. So they're accepted because they have asked for direction and they're aware of their own deficiencies. The people to avoid are those who are difficult and immoral, toxic, and they have no interest in seeking advice or becoming better. So these individuals are wasting our time. Your life and your time are one of the most valuable things, because this is how you work. In this plane, we work with time and with energy, physicality. So you cannot afford to spend that time on the wrong people who are not interested on improving themselves, getting better. And it's also important to separate and discern between the intelligent and the wise. There are many intelligent people out there, very smart people out there, and we're all familiar with a few really famous ones. But that intelligence is a skill of the intellect and skill of the brain, basically, or it's a skill of the intellectual center. It's just a skill. It has nothing to do with ethics or morals. We know this because the skills of that intellect have been used by people like Hitler, Donald Trump, and I don't need to mention all of them, I guess. There are lots of smart people we know. People say Donald Trump is an idiot, and I don't disagree with that either. Like, he's kind of crazy, I think. In some ways, lacks common sense, seems quite stupid. But basically, these people are extraordinarily powerful. In certain areas, they're very intelligent, but this has nothing to do with wisdom, right? Because the ethics is not there, right? The carrying of moral conduct is not there, and the morals themselves are not there either. So a person might be highly competent as a singer or a carpenter or a politician or a scientist or a surgeon. They can remain completely unwise. What makes a person unwise is a lack of this universal moral clarity and a failure to understand the proper relationship with other beings. So in our history, it is full of people who possess really great skills, artists and scientists, and they're morally aberrant. So while you can learn some things from these people, or at least from any intelligent person, they can still be a fool and doesn't constitute wisdom in the Dhamma. So the teachings of the Mangala Sutta also clarify the nature of higher beings like devas. These are luminous, beautiful beings, and they've attained their status through generosity and kindness. But, however, they are not finished with their spiritual journey. Many levels of heaven are still within samsara, so they're temporary, they're cyclic. A Buddhist heaven, all of them except for the final nibbana are temporary. Even if it lasts an unfathomable amount of time, millions of years, right? Tens or hundreds of thousands of years for every life and being reborn as a god over and over again. So the fact that devas have to visit the Buddha for advice in the suttas, that shows that the ultimate wisdom is not necessarily found just in heaven. Instead, it's embodied here on earth as well, everywhere, on every plane, because every plane is visited by a bodhisattva or a number of them, and the Dhamma is spread and taught. And so it's here right now, and the wise humans have it. You don't need to look into other dimensions for this, for the higher teaching. You can find it here. So when encountering people who are not interested in wisdom, the thing is, you don't have to feel obligated to fix them. If you are not a teacher, it's best to simply redirect them to someone who is, right? Like a real ordained monk or a professional in some way, in some other field if they have a problem, right? So you don't want to waste your time, especially if they're not interested in improving, don't waste your time with them. If they are, but you're uncertain what to do, then send them somewhere else or to someone else. But you can be as helpful as you can along the way. You have to just protect your resources, conserve your energy and time. You have a limited amount of energy, every day. So you want to maximize that positive impact. You have to discern between people. This approach is like a medical triage in a crowded hospital. Doctors first treat the patients who have a serious illness, right? That's high priority. These people who are capable of responding to the medicine. And those who will recover on their own, or those who cannot be saved, are lower priorities. So life is the same way. Because there are not enough wise people to deal with everyone. Wise individuals will naturally try to transmit that wisdom out of compassion, but they have to focus on those who are seeking help or can receive it. So monks emphasize that we have to learn to resign from the task of being everything to everybody. You have to realize your role and purpose. You don't have to be a jack of all trades, right? This is true for parents whose children may be adults and they come to them with all sorts of complaints and questions and criticism about complaints for their own life and criticism toward the way the parents raised them. But in these, whatever it is, whatever advice they have, you can only help them so much. It boils down to the fact that you're just a parent. You know how to make dinner for them, how to make lunch, how to drive them to soccer practice, right? You should not expect yourself to know everything. They should not expect you to know everything. We're not professionals in every field. We're just parents. So if they need a therapist, a psychiatrist, they should see one. If they need a monk, they should see one or go to a temple or study the teaching. You wouldn't perform neurosurgery at the kitchen table. You shouldn't try to solve complex mental theories if it's not your specialty. And this applies to aging parents as well. Your role is to support them and drive them to appointments if they don't drive. And it's not to be their doctor. And when you're seeking spiritual teachers, it's also important to be cautious of ones who are wise with an edge or have, distinct vices, and to a point where it's not really acceptable anymore. It shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be observable in the teachers. So in the Theravada school, teachers are bound by a code of conduct. So to be wise doesn't mean being above that law. Everyone is subject to that law. If a guru or a teacher can't define their boundaries or claims to be exempt from rules, you're taking a risk with them. So history is full of charismatic leaders. There are various spiritualist leaders and experts, different kinds of gurus of different religions and traditions. And there are people who are spiritual, but without any particular religion. They just teach general esotericism. And these experts all have different levels of knowledge and levels of comprehension, and that comprehension equates to their ethics. So if they can't behave themselves, in the past too, the Buddha himself referred to these people as fools. These experts can be fools. If someone can't maintain basic moral conduct, you should reconsider whether or not they're truly wise. They can't speak one thing and do the opposite. So the Buddha would pull these people to the side and give them a lecture about their shortcomings. The burden placed on, and so now there's a bit of concern for people out there who have to be around fools all the time, or people who are not very wise or delusional or mentally ill. And that's all the social workers and counselors and different doctors out there. Medical staff in the West is another area where wisdom is often lacking. These professionals, they've actually, especially with social workers, they are the ones who replaced what used to be religious workers of the past. So the social workers used to be just very religious people and very pious. They did the real social work. But nowadays, we are exploited by social structures, right? It's very common for a single, warm-hearted, sincere, genuine worker to be assigned an overwhelming number of clients who are all kind of dysfunctional and inconducive of learning, inconducive for your own learning, really, except for you can learn about how bad things can get with people's lives and their minds. And this leads to burnout. These people are exploited and taken advantage of in the system. It leads to burnout. They work too much. Nurses work way too much, overtime, all the time. Social workers are working too much too. And there's a decline in mental health. It's common, and it's kind of inevitable for these jobs. So Buddhism suggests that this kind of work for lay people should be kept at a minimum or in a balance. Some stress is good because you need to recognize your own defilements. You have to recognize your reactions, your own anger and impatience and all that. But with this kind of work, I mean, this is not just occasional when you see a friend. This is your job, your career. You're doing this all the time, so it would be best to keep the hours very low. You only need to work a few hours per week, maybe, half of a work week instead of a full work week, so that you can get by and you can recover mentally. And they should pay people more for this as well, and that way they can get by, because it's taxing on your emotional center. So if you are in such a field, you have to draw firm lines and prioritize your own health. It's highly recommended. That system might continue to demand more than the average human can reasonably handle. And what about relationships? What if we've left a toxic relationship or an unhelpful, inconducive one, and we're struggling with the guilt or remorse of it because we're just doing it for our own good in this practice? The Buddha's advice is very clear. You are allowed to stop thinking about these people. You don't have to process a toxic relationship or feel remorse, on a daily basis, or guilt. It's, especially in this case, if it's right for you, when it's right for you. It's the right thing to do. That's a boundary. You don't have to feel so bad about it. There's a kind of dissatisfaction in the relationship because it's not helpful. It's not conducive to this work. It's necessary to leave. But your mind is, and it's a private space. So when it comes to the remorse or guilt, yeah, you might feel, it's understandable to feel a little bit sorry for the other person, but you don't have to linger there for too long. And so Buddhism encourages to not actually, even though we have to work on our defects and things, if we can, it's best to not think negatively altogether. Maybe you have already asked someone to leave your house and you didn't invite them back into your thoughts. So instead, you should continue filling your mind with the good impressions of the memories of the good people, and put yourself in the relationships that are conducive for you. Just create a positive space everywhere you go and in your mind. And so you want to populate your life with these positive associations. You don't have to leave much room for the negative ones. Finally, there's a difference between avoiding fools and feeling aversion toward them. If you feel anger or hostility, you are inviting a different kind of fully into your own mind, right? The goal is to disassociate from those who refuse to improve, these fools per se, and whilst remaining free of your own foolishness or tendencies of impatience and anger and resentment and criticism. So You want to move away from the toxic influences without carrying weight on your shoulders, without carrying hatred and anger. You have to protect your own peace and clear the path for a more meaningful way of life. And so Buddhism emphasizes that hostility and these other negative emotions, they are poisons, essentially. When you carry these emotions, you're the one being harmed by someone else's toxicity. Regardless of what the other person does, it's still your own way of reacting that's harming you, your own response. So we have to direct our mind towards loving kindness whenever possible. We have to work at this moment to moment. If you find it difficult to feel a sense of goodwill, this metta, you can start off with some other things, right? Metta, loving kindness, begins in an ordinary. We have to start at the level we're at. We want to start at the ordinary level. So this means turn to the things that give you some sense of joy, a small amount of caffeine from your coffee, your tea, and the people in your life, your relationships, the coworkers you'd like to be around, good conversation, your pets, and focus on these beautiful and innocent things, cats and babies, and just fill yourself, saturate yourself in positive emotions, in joy, kindness, and selflessness, and cultivate that. So we start in that ordinary way in ordinary life. We cultivate more or less with a conditioned joy and loving kindness, but that's how we cultivate it, and that's how we develop it. And that way you leave less room for toxicity. So practicing loving kindness serves as a sort of vaccination against folly. When your state of goodwill is strong, you can remain in the presence of difficult people for quite some time without having a terrible reaction. But even with this protection, you shouldn't expose yourself to unnecessary toxicity. We need just enough stress that we're at our own level challenged to work on our own defects, to recognize impatience, to recognize resentment, bitterness, vindictiveness, anger, unjust or unjust, well, that's what vindictiveness is, unjust judgment over others, and blame, excessive blame. But we need just enough to recognize and not too much to get overwhelmed and create a negative environment. This is a balance. It's not either or. You don't want to be completely ignorant of your own anger, completely living in a protected environment where there's no stress. It's not good for our species because the defects are too strong that they'll just lay dormant. They need to spontaneously arise a little bit so that we can work on them. If our defects were lighter, we didn't have as much, then yes, this would be a work that's purely based on renunciation. You could renounce anger and stay positive. That would work, but it's not the best system for us. We need both the Buddhist and Gnostic system that, it's the same, but Gnosticism emphasizes recognizing the defects and being in training in this psychological gymnasium, which is life. It's good to have some stimulation. It's good to have some stress. You need to work on that. So even the most patient person has limits, though. So, right, it's unwise to test your own limits all the time. to the point of a breakdown. So when it comes to being harmed by others, the Buddhists rely on, now this is a thing about justice. If you are being harmed by others in different ways and harassed and abused physically or verbally, and if it gets too much, what do you do about it? You have to transform those impressions through meditation. And pranayama is the means of gathering the energy, the fuel. You should be doing pranayama every day, 10 minutes at least. Before you meditate is good. You meditate to transform those impressions. But regarding the sense of, there was a question raised in a talk about justice. What should we do? Should we sort of take revenge or sort of fulfill some kind of justice? And this is not necessary. According to Buddhism, you can take the passive route for most cases, unless something needs to be done. If something has already been done and it's bad, sometimes we have to tell people that something is wrong. Other times we know, the other person knows. They know it's wrong, but they do it anyway. So what can you do? You can't tell. They know it's wrong, so there's no point telling them that to not do something. Well, Buddhism talks of karma, or kama in theravada tradition. So this is cause and effect, right? Karma means action. It refers to the action and effect. You don't have to do anything. The universe will take care of it. It's the doer's device, right? The doer is left to their own devices. It's like gravity. There's a mechanical aspect to it. It's just a law that exists. It's like gravity. And there are judges, Buddhas, that will also judge the situation and weigh it on a scale. So everything's taken care of for you. It's a moral dimension that operates in the laws of physics. So the universe has its own precise way of balancing causes and effects. Your primary duty regarding fools is actually a duty to yourself, to not get angry or impatient or judgmental and critical or bitter. You're trying to cultivate loving kindness here. Buddhism suggests looking at the world through the perspective that nature makes no mistakes. This is how beings naturally are. There's a mechanical aspect and a conscious aspect. Many beings in existence are conditioned. Nature produces both wise and foolish beings. There's no sense in getting frustrated. So we don't want to get frustrated around toxic or confused people. We don't want to be around them. We don't want to waste their time. It's valuable. We can still wish them well. Now, in a society, we ensure that even the most difficult people, like prisoners, are still fed and clothed. So the right attitude should be carried. We can maintain this loving kindness and compassion and understanding. We don't need to be cruel. We shouldn't hold on to resentment and hatred, vengeance. The idea is you just don't want to be around the wrong people. You just have to keep your distance from the wrong beings. That's it. You don't have to hold anything against them. That's negative. You don't want so much taste or perspective, right? That's the sign of the negative. Or the sign of the shameful, when we don't like shameful people and you shun them mentally. You don't need that. And there's when you look at it from the long term, there is always some possibility that these people will turn around. It's a possibility. They see the light and they want to change, so we should wish them well and hope for them. So until then, we want to maintain a neutral and yet exalted perspective. We want a neutral perspective on not seeing the fools as very with bitterness, and we want to cultivate compassion, kindness, and stay focused on our own learning. Refuse to waste our limited resources on negativity.